I want to tell you about a big change that's happening in my life. My name is Lena, and I'm 30 years old. I work in an office, and I've been working really hard ever since I finished college. For the past 8 years, I've been with a big company, putting in a lot of effort to get ahead. All that hard work paid off because now, at a young age, I'm a department manager. My boss is great and always gives me useful advice, and I work with a team of really talented and motivated people. I feel very fulfilled at work, but my personal life hasn't been as fulfilling. When I was a student, I had a boyfriend, but since I started working, I didn't have much luck in that area. My friend noticed and decided to set me up by hosting a dinner party. That's where I met Oscar. He was kind, had a great smile, and seemed really easy to get along with. We were the same age, so we had a lot to talk about, and it was fun being around him. We quickly became friends, exchanged numbers, and started going out to eat together. After some time, Oscar told me he had feelings for me, and we started dating. We got along really well, and eventually he proposed to me. I was over the moon to marry the man I loved so much. Shortly after, I went to meet his parents. They were very kind and welcomed me warmly. Oscar's mom said she was so proud that her son brought home such a wonderful woman. Oscar was a bit embarrassed and tried to stop his parents from going overboard with the compliments, but it was clear they were just very happy for him. His parents asked if I planned to keep working after we got married, and I told them I did. They seemed really supportive, which was a relief because I had heard stories from friends about in-laws who expected their daughter-in-law to quit her job and just take care of the household. I felt lucky to have such understanding in-laws. Oscar and I got married, and he moved into my house. I was so excited to start our new life together. Being newlyweds was everything I hoped it would be. I loved coming home to him, and just being with him made me so happy. But then, 6 months into our marriage, Oscar told me he wanted to talk about something important. He asked if I would consider living with his parents. He explained that they were getting older, and he was worried about them. I understood where he was coming from because my own parents are about the same age, but my brother and his wife live with them, so I didn't have to worry as much. Oscar's request left me feeling conflicted. On one hand, I loved him and wanted to support him. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure how living with his parents would change our relationship. I knew it was something we'd have to figure out together, and I wanted to do what was best for our marriage. So, I thought everything was fine, and I didn't have anything to worry about. However, my husband is an only child, so it makes sense that he's worried about his parents. He then asked, "Does this mean we're going to live with my parents?" I was surprised and asked, "Do they even have a room for us? Don't they use all the rooms for different things?" He replied, "About that, I think it would be a good idea to renovate my parents' house and turn it into a two-family house." I was confused, so I asked, "Two families? What do you mean?" He explained, "If we do that, it'll be much cheaper than buying a new house. We can live in a beautiful, spacious home while still having our own privacy." I thought about it and realized it was actually a good idea. My in-laws are very kind, and if we have two separate living spaces, it wouldn't be as stressful as living all together in one house. So I agreed and said, "Yes, that's fine. We can do that." My husband was so happy and said, "Thank you. My mom and dad will be so happy too." Later on, my in-laws came to visit us, and they were very grateful for our decision. I started to think that living close to such a kind and cheerful family wouldn't be so bad. Soon after that, my husband and I began discussing the details of remodeling his parents' house. We figured out that the cost would be around $200,000. But then my husband said something surprising. He looked a bit uncomfortable and said, "Actually, I need to ask you a favor. Can you pay for the remodeling?" I was confused and asked, "What do you mean? The whole amount? Why?" He hesitated and then said, "The truth is, we're in debt." I was shocked. Neither my husband nor my in-laws had ever mentioned anything about being in debt before we got married, or even when we were dating. I asked, "How much debt do they have?" He answered, "About $300,000. I was stunned. I thought it might be a few $1,000s, but I never imagined it would be that much. I couldn't help but shout out, "What?" He explained, "It wasn't so bad at first, but the debt kept growing, and even though I tried to pay it back, I couldn't. My parents are already living on a pension, so they can't help much, and the debt just keeps getting bigger. I was in shock and felt overwhelmed by this sudden news. I had no idea that my in-laws owed so much money. Then my husband said, "Lena, I need another favor. Will you help me pay off my parents' debt? They can't manage it anymore, and I don't make a very good salary either." I was even more worried and asked, "But if we have this much debt, how can we afford to renovate the house and live together as two families?" He insisted, "The renovation is important, so let's go ahead as planned." I was confused and upset. "You're asking me to pay for the remodeling and also your parents' debt? That's a lot of money, like $250,000 in total." He looked at me with a serious expression and said, "I know this is really hard to ask, but I want to build a life with you, and I want to protect my parents too. I love both you and my parents so much. I'm sorry if it seems like I'm asking for too much, but if you really love me, please help me. I'll pay you back little by little." I felt very distressed. My husband and in-laws had no one else to turn to but me, and I knew my husband really loved me. But at that moment, I didn't know what to do. The weight of the situation felt overwhelming. I was completely fooled by my husband's words. They say love is blind, and I think that's exactly what happened to me. I thought to myself, okay, I'll pay for it, and I agreed to take on the responsibility. My husband was so grateful. He shook my hand and thanked me over and over. He told my in-laws, and later, they came to our house to apologize to me. My mother-in-law even cried tears of joy, saying, "I'll do my best from now on." I felt a sense of duty to help my husband's family, so I decided to take over their debt, even though it was a big burden. I had some savings, but I was scared to pay off the entire debt all at once. So I decided to pay about $330,000 from my savings and then handle the rest through installments. When we all sat down to discuss how to manage the debt, I explained my plan to my in-laws. They were very understanding and told me I could do whatever I felt was best. Then my husband suggested, "Why don't you transfer the money directly to the debt repayment account? My parents aren't very good at managing money, and it would be safer if you handled it." My in-laws agreed with him, and I realized that it would be more efficient and less risky to do it this way. So I agreed to manage the payments directly. Once we had everything sorted out, my in-laws looked relieved. They said, "Now we don't have to be scared of those monthly debt collection calls anymore." My husband encouraged them to thank me properly. They were very grateful, saying, "We can't thank you enough, Lena. We're so lucky to have you as part of our family." Although their gratitude made me happy, there was a small part of me that felt uneasy. I couldn't help but wonder if they saw me as just a source of money. But I pushed those feelings aside, reminding myself that I wanted to take care of my husband's family because I loved him. So I began making the payments and also took charge of remodeling the house to create a beautiful, spacious home where we could all live together. The new house turned out great, and my in-laws were thrilled with it. My husband was excited too, and I enjoyed using the new kitchen to cook meals. The location was more convenient, and since my commute to work was shorter, I had more free time. I used that extra time to study and focus on my job, all while working hard to pay off the debt. However, something started to bother me. Despite my husband promising to help pay off his parents' debt, he hadn't contributed at all. When I brought it up, he said his salary wasn't enough to make any payments. I became suspicious, so I asked him how much he was actually bringing home each month and asked to see his pay stubs. But he refused to show me anything, and that made me feel even more uneasy. So I really don't know how much my husband earns, but he's supposed to be helping repay his parents' debts. I worked hard for about a year to pay off a large part of it. One day, my in-laws asked me how much more we still had to repay. They said, "If it's been a year, you shouldn't have that much left to pay back, right? Maybe around $200,000 to $310,000. I told them, "Well, we've paid back about $120,000 so far, so there's roughly $180,000 left to go." My in-laws were shocked. "You paid back that much, Lena? That's amazing. At this rate, you'll have it all paid off in about 3 years. I smiled and said, "If I keep working hard, I'll be able to pay it off. My in-laws were so happy they even cried. Seeing how much my husband's parents appreciated my efforts made me feel like all the hard work was worth it. But a few days later, something unexpected happened. I had to work overtime that day, so I told my husband I'd be home late. However, the work went surprisingly quickly, and we finished on time. I decided to hurry home so I could cook dinner for my husband as usual. When I got home and opened the front door, I noticed my in-laws' shoes by the entrance. I thought they must have come over for something, so I walked towards the living room. As I got closer, I overheard my in-laws and my husband talking. My father-in-law said, "You did great marrying that woman, Oscar. I can't believe you landed someone with that much money." My husband replied, "When I heard she worked for a big company, I knew I had to win her over. I really worked on seducing her." My mother-in-law added, "You should be more grateful. After all, you're one of the reasons we're in debt." My father-in-law protested, "What? I'm the one who spent the least." My mother-in-law shot back, "How much did you blow on horse racing? Your gambling is out of control." He tried to defend himself, saying, "I hit the jackpot once in a while, so sometimes we even made a profit." But my mother-in-law wasn't convinced. "How can you call it a profit when we still owe $300,000? My husband chimed in, "At this rate, we'll be out of debt soon and back on track. It's great. And Lena even remodeled our house. I really lucked out with her." Then my heart sank as I heard him say, "Well, I'm going to get rid of her after she finishes paying off the debt." They all laughed together. I was so shocked, I couldn't move from where I was standing by the front door. I felt like my entire world had just shattered. After a moment, I gathered myself, made a loud noise as I closed the front door, and called out, "I'm home." I forced myself to walk into the living room, where my in-laws and husband greeted me with smiles. "Lena, welcome home. Good job today," they said with their usual cheerful faces. My in-laws then excused themselves, saying, "We're heading back to our room. Let's have dinner together again sometime." But I was terrified of their gentle smiles because I knew what they had just been saying behind my back. Seeing my husband pretending to be a loving partner with a smile on his face shocked me to my core. I couldn't help but wonder what I had been doing all this time, working so hard to pay off their debt. My husband asked, "Didn't you say you had to work late today?" I replied, "Yeah, I ended up finishing earlier than expected." But inside, I felt like everything I believed in was crumbling apart. So, I decided to hurry home and cook dinner as usual, pretending everything was fine. I acted as calmly as I could, making sure my husband didn't notice that I knew the truth. During dinner, I kept up the act, smiling and chatting like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was heartbroken. Later, when my husband was taking a bath, I locked myself in my room and cried. I cried so hard, letting out all the pain and betrayal I felt. But after crying, something inside me hardened. I knew I had to do something. I needed to give my husband and in-laws a reality check. From that moment on, I started planning for a divorce. I quietly made arrangements and thought about what I would do after the marriage ended. It took about 3 months, during which I kept pretending to be happy and devoted, all the while preparing for my escape. Finally, one day, I told my husband that I had finished paying off his parents' debt. He was shocked.
"What?
"You paid off the debt? That $300,000? That was supposed to take around 3 years, right?" I explained, "Actually, I had more money saved up than I let on. I was initially scared to pay it all off at once, so I took out small amounts from my salary and savings. But when we got below $200,000, I thought it would be better to just pay it all at once." He looked stunned, so I asked, "Do you mind if I show you the bank book?" I handed him the bank book, and his eyes widened as he saw the entries showing the $180,000 payment. He tried to hide his excitement, but I could see how eager he was. "Wow, Lena, thank you. My parents are going to be so happy." He pretended to be emotional, covering his face as if he were crying, but I knew it was all an act. Shortly after, my in-laws came over to thank me as well. They were overjoyed, saying things like, "Thank you so much, Lena. We're so lucky to have you in our family. You're like a godsend." If I had known the truth, I might have been happy to hear their praise. But I knew who they really were, and I was only playing along because I was ready to put my plan into action. A few days later, my husband came to me looking very serious. He said, "Lena, I'm sorry, but you have to leave me." I pretended to be shocked. "What do you mean?" He continued, "I have a new girlfriend. I'm going to live here with her, so I'm divorcing you. You're going to stay at my parents' place." I was taken aback by his boldness. I knew from eavesdropping on their conversation that he planned to leave me once the debt was paid off, but I didn't expect him to openly admit his infidelity. And what did he mean by sending me to live with his parents after he left me? "I don't really understand what you're saying," I replied, acting confused. His mood darkened. "You're not very smart, are you? I don't need you anymore, either as a breadwinner or a housekeeper. But I can let you stay at my parents' house if you want." Just then, the front door opened and my in-laws walked in. "Did you finally tell her?" my mother-in-law asked. "Yeah, I told her," my husband replied, sounding satisfied. "I wish I could have been there to see her face," my mother-in-law said, laughing. "Anyway, Lena, you can come live with us if you do the chores. But we'll charge you rent, of course." They all laughed at me, as if my pain was some kind of joke. It was the most awful moment, seeing these people show their true colors. But I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I took a deep breath and said, "Actually, all of you need to leave." My in-laws looked shocked, their eyes wide. "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten?" I calmly told them, "I can easily pay for the renovation myself because you changed the title of the house to my name. That means I have the rights to this house, and I get to decide who can live here and who has to leave." When I said this, my in-laws' faces turned pale. They suddenly remembered that the house was legally mine. I continued, "I'm sorry, but you can't live here anymore. Once we get divorced, you'll be strangers to me." My in-laws finally understood how serious the situation was, but my husband wasn't ready to give up. He argued, "But you took over our debt and paid it off in full. You're the one losing money here. If we didn't have that debt, we could have at least found a new place to live." "That's true," my in-laws chimed in. "Thank you for letting us live in this nice house while you paid off our debts." But I wasn't finished. I dropped a bombshell. Actually, I didn't pay off the remaining $180,000 of the debt. They were shocked.
"What?"
"But we saw the money was missing from your bank book." I explained, "That was just a separate account I set up to move money around. The debt still stands at $180,000. I've been making large payments to delay the collection process, but it's only a matter of time before they come knocking. So, it's up to you to pay off the rest." My husband and in-laws were stunned into silence. Then I warned them, "Oscar, you told me you were having an affair, so you'll be paying alimony. I'll also be charging your affair partner for damages." My husband panicked. "Lena, please don't. She only went out with me because she thought I had money and owned a house. If I have to pay alimony, she'll leave me." I responded coldly, "I don't care about that. You made your choices." At that point, my husband and in-laws were all begging me not to leave them. They were terrified of losing everything. But I had no sympathy left for them. "I have nothing to do with you people anymore, no matter what you say. I've also put this house on the market, and you'll be paying back the $120,000 I covered for your debts through my lawyer." My in-laws were frozen, completely overwhelmed by the realization that they had lost everything. I then filed for divorce and demanded alimony from my husband, as well as from his affair partner. I also sought $120,000 from my in-laws to cover what I had paid for them. The renovated house sold for about $200,000, which was a good price because it was in a desirable location. A family looking for a duplex bought it, so I paid off the remaining $320,000, which included the $120,000 I owed for the debt and $200,000 for the renovation. In the end, I gained $80,000 plus alimony from my ex-husband and his affair partner. On top of that, I received a small payment of $120,000 from my ex-in-laws. I ended up being the biggest beneficiary in this situation. Considering all the pain and betrayal I went through, I think it's only fair. I suffered so much that I lost trust in people, and I believe they deserved the consequences of their actions. As for how I managed to have so much money saved up, I had been learning how to invest, so I could pay off my in-laws' debts as quickly as possible. Since I already had a decent amount of savings, I invested tens of thousands of dollars and watched my assets grow significantly over the course of a year. Plus, I received a raise at work, so my income was pretty good, which allowed me to take such bold steps. Now, my former in-laws are back in debt, and they've lost their house. Honestly, I think they deserved it because they tried to scam me. People like that should face the consequences of their actions. I've learned a lot from this experience. From now on, I'll be more careful about who I trust. I'll continue to save and invest so I can live a comfortable life in my old age and make happy memories with people who truly deserve my trust.